aware you about the unknown and the unidentified flying objects?
Oh, yes, we discussed it at every conference that we had with the military, and they never were able to make me a concrete report on.
Do you have anything on the subject, sir?
No, I haven't had anything on the subject, and there's always things like that going on. The flying saucers, and they've had other things, you know.
For years, the world has seen reality distorted, facts manipulated, and truth hidden. But there's even more to the story than anyone has ever suspected, because no one has been able to see the whole picture until now.
Welcome back, friends, to another episode of the Unexplained Rundown. I'm your host, Grant Levac, and if you're new to this channel and you found it intentionally, then like me, you're intrigued by the unexplained mysteries of this mortal coil of ours, and you crave to know what's real and what's not. So thank you for taking some time out of your evening, your morning, your day, wherever you are. I want to say hi to a couple of folks that have already joined us in the chat. So Mark McHiggins, hot coffee ready to go. Hopefully you're not an evening coffee drinker. I know if I am, you'll never get me to sleep. Daryl Woodward, thank you, my friend, for joining. Great to see you here. My main man, Jimmy Syczowski, good to see you, my friend. Thanks for joining. We have Bliss and Masks popping this on the background while I complete an assignment. So hopefully I'm not too much of a distraction for you as you get your work done there. Welcome, Eddie Fong. Good to see you from Brisbane. We've got Ty Dubbins from Cairns. Welcome, and we've got Peter A from Sydney West. So, look, thank you all for taking some time again out of your evening or your morning to join me for this session. It's great to be with you. It would be remiss of me if I didn't acknowledge a dear friend that this community lost earlier today, Lee Spiegel, who has been a veteran researcher and just good bloke in this community, sadly passed away today. So I know that Lee, I'd never met Lee. I'd never had any engagement with Lee. I'd seen him on a lot of podcasts and live streams, and I was familiar with his work. I know he inspired many folks, and he was respected by many, many more. So a sad day. Condolences, obviously, to his family, his friends, and anyone whose lives he's touched. So, yeah, sad day that we've lost a good friend in Lee Spiegel. But today we're going to we're going to have a look at a bit of a walkthrough of the latest Freedom of Information Act document that I received from the Royal Australian Air Force. And there's quite a bit of history that is behind this document. So for a bit of context, let me kind of just tee this up for you. For those of you that are new to the channel, welcome. Thanks again for being here. Feel free, consider subscribing to this channel if you want to follow my journey on the UAP topic. Really, my journey, I've been interested in this topic since I was a kid, but it was really not until COVID that I really became a sponge and trying to soak up as much as I could on the UAP topic. And I was starting to see a lot of traction this topic was getting in the United States. And it made me beg the question, well, what is Australia doing about UAP? And it seems that they're doing very little. They're doing sweet F all, sadly. So my quest has been to try and engage government, my elected representatives, as well as the Australian Department of Defence, to really push them in the direction of, well, as a Five Eyes partner and ally of the United States, we should be really taking this topic seriously, because the US have told us time and time again that it is a national security threat and a safety of flight risk. So how did this document come about that we're going to have a look at this evening? So let me wind the clock back for you and take you back in time to the 27th of October of 2021. Senator Peter Whish-Wilson, who's the senator for Tasmania, he's the only Australian senator to date that's had the courage and gumption to raise the topic of UAP in Parliament, in government. And it's very unfortunate that he is still the only Australian senator that's taking this topic seriously and wanting to elevate the conversation in an Australian context. So how this came about was on the 25th of June 2021, I believe. The ODNI, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, released its preliminary assessment on UAP. And so on the 27th of October, later that year, Senator Peter Whish-Wilson, in a Senate estimates hearing, which is kind of like a budget estimates where senators convene for hearings to scrutinize where taxpayer dollars are being spent, to make sure that the Australian taxpaying public is getting a return on its investment, that Australian taxpayer dollars is going towards programs that are of value and benefit to the country, basically, and that money's not being wasted. So Senator Whish-Wilson, having read ODNI's preliminary assessment on UAP, he pressed the then Chief of Air Force, Air Marshal Mel Hupfield, on what is Australia doing about UAP? What's happening on UAP in Australian context? And the front end of this video clip that I'm going to show you is important because it kind of sets the stage for this document that I'm going to review with you this evening. So let me show this on screen so you can get some context for what we're going to cover off on this evening. So let me pull this in to play. There we go. It only runs for a couple of, not even a minute or two, so I'll just play it so you can watch.
My questions relate to release of the report on the 25th of June 2021 by the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, Preliminary Assessments, Unidentified Aerial Phenomena. This is an issue that has been raised in Congress. The Department of Defence has submitted a report. It's become a significant matter of public interest. And I suppose my first question is, are you aware of that report, Chief of Air Force?
I'm not formally aware of the report, but if I'm thinking there was an article in the newspapers, a commentary about that at some stage, but I'm not quite sure of the content of the report.
Okay. Just as a matter of interest, what questions did you think I was going to ask?
I thought you were going to ask some questions about aircraft, but it sounds like you're going to ask questions about UFOs.
Well, we'd be very interesting to hear your views on this. Look, yes, it has been reported in the media extensively.
Now, turn that off. So you can just see there the look of disdain on the Air Marshal's face. He was essentially completely caught off guard with that line of questioning from the senator. So he had absolutely no idea that he was going to get thrown questions on UAP, UFOs. So following that Senate estimates hearing back in October of 2021, the Royal Australian Air Force essentially said behind the scenes, well, we better do some prep work for our next Senate estimates, because they have them usually, upwards of 2 times a year. And that one was in October 2021. The next one was in February of 2022. So the Royal Australian Air Force started to put together a Senate estimates brief, or essentially a brief, a Chief of Air Force brief, a briefing paper for the Chief of Air Force on UAP, so that when he was back in the hot seat, potentially in February of 2022, he would be prepped and ready to go with, some talking points, a line of, narrative that he wanted to follow, and so on. So this is the document that I secured through the Freedom of Information Act in July of last year. Now, I won't read through this entire document for you, because we're going to essentially go through the latest available version of this document this evening. But this is the document. And why this document is important, it's actually the most significant document to come out of the Royal Australian Air Force and the Australian Department of Defence in more than 25 years. Because none of it's redacted. It is a fairly comprehensive briefing paper on UAP, and it kind of really gives you a sense as to the official position of the Royal Australian Air Force on UAP and its mindset. The thing that jumps out the most when you first see this document, namely the table of contents, is strategic narrative. So that's specifically the story that the Royal Australian Air Force want to tell the public, members of parliament, senators, and the media if they're pressed on, well, what is Australia doing about UAP? Because our Five Eyes partner and ally across the pond, the US, is taking it seriously. So there is also a section devoted to talking points, so that if the Air Marshal was again pressed in a Senate estimates, which he was, by Senator Whish-Wilson or another senator, always ask questions by the media. And sadly, the media hasn't got off its fat ass yet on this topic. So I get fired up because the media is just not exercising a shred of journalistic due diligence when it comes to this topic. But if we scroll on down, I'm not going to spend too much time on this document other than show you that strategic narrative. This is what really is quite interesting, because the Australian, see if there's some comments, I'll come back to this, but strategic narrative. So the Royal Australian Air Force was magically somehow able to make a determination as to what UAP are likely to be or not likely to be, even though, and this is just based on my knowledge, even though they had not investigated the topic, the UAP UFO topic, since 1996, they had not engaged the United States on this topic. They had not been privy to any of the classified data that was classified within the, that was, I should say, included in the classified reports that had been provided to Congress by the Office of Director of National Intelligence and then subsequently ARO. And they were magically able to make this determination without having seen any of the data that the US had, that UAP are likely to be natural or other benign phenomena, whatever the hell other benign phenomena is, anomalies with sensors or human-made technologies. UAP could be other nations' systems, either contemporary or advanced. Absolutely no mention there whatsoever of a catch-all other bin that the ODNI included in its preliminary assessment on the 25th of June 2021. So the only other thing I just wanted to highlight for you in this document is under the section talking points. One of the questions that was popped down as a potential one that could be asked of the Chief of Air Force is, as an ally, have the United States offered to or asked to collaborate on UAP investigations? No, they haven't, nor has any other nation or ally requested or offered to collaborate. And this one, defense has no desire to seek collaboration on this issue. Well, why? I mean, Australia is always in lockstep with the United States when it comes to defense-related issues. Why on earth would you not want to know what's keeping your ally and Five Eyes partner up at night when they've been repeating the same line that UAP are a national security threat and a safety of flight risk? So this document, again, the most significant document to come out of the Australian Department of Defence and the Royal Australian Air Force in more than 25 years. And it goes on to providing more talking points, timeline of significant events, relevant media coverage, other questions on notice that have been submitted, and so on. So, and I think that was who was the clearing officers and so on. So I'm going to show you this evening the latest available version of that document, of the Chief of Air Force brief on UAP, or again referred to sometimes internally as a Senate estimates brief, a briefing paper that those in defense leadership will need to review to prepare themselves for any questioning at a Senate estimates. So let us pull up on screen. And by the way, it's, if you're interested to look at the often interesting cross-section of Freedom of Information Act documents that get released from not just the Department of Defense, but most government agencies. There are a couple that are exempt from FOIA, usually those in the intelligence community. But what you can do, and I would encourage you to do this if you're interested to see just what some of the other types of Freedom of Information Act requests are out there, if you jump onto Google or any web browser and you just type in your Freedom of Information Disclosure Log or Defence Disclosure Log, you'll come to the Australian Department of Defence's page dedicated for the disclosure of Freedom of Information Act requests that had documents released. And so if you work your way through them, they'll often give you the reference number that applies to the request and usually a summary of what the topic or the subject matter of that request was about. Really, really interesting. You'll come across quite a few here historically that I've submitted pertaining to UAP. So if you are interested to have a look at just the smorgasbord of requests that are submitted by a whole different bunch of folks, Australians around the country, it's a good document to look at. It's a good website to look at, I should say. So let me pull up now the latest available version of this Chief of Air Force brief on UAP. And I'll just make sure I've got it. Here it is. Okay, so I'm going to walk you through this document so you can gain a bit of an understanding as to the commentary that's included, and I'll break it down for you and give you a sense as to what some of the implications are. And if you've got any questions as we go through, please do feel free to throw them in the chat. I'll certainly address some questions that you've got at various intervals throughout this evening's live stream. I don't intend to stay beyond pretty much the hour mark, so for those of you that need to jump off at any point in time, feel free. So this document, we can see that it's it's a May of this year document. There was a Senate estimates hearing in, I have to remember my dates, 27th of October of 2021, and I believe there was one in February, but UAP was not addressed, February of 22, where UAP was not brought up in that instance. But the one that was key was on the 9th of November of 2022, and then there was one in February of this year, and one in May of this year. And Senator Whish-Wilson pressed the Chief of Air Force, the both former and current Chief of Air Force, in October 21, November 22, and February of this year. So this was an updated version of this Chief of Air Force brief that was put together in preparation for the May Senate estimates or budget estimates hearing that was scheduled. Air Marshal Robert Chipman, he is the current Chief of Air Force. He took over from Mel Hupfield on the 1st of July of last year. So we can see this document is titled Unidentified Aerial Phenomena / Unidentified Flying Objects. Handling note, Air Marshal Robert Chipman, Chief of Air Force, to lead on the topic of UAP UFOs. Now, the Royal Australian Air Force has a long history of investigating UAP and UFOs. Actually, the vernacular unidentified aerial phenomena dates back to 1959 in Australia. It was used on reports compiled by the Department of Civil Aviation. So UAP is actually not a new term. It's been around for a long time. And the Royal Australian Air Force has had almost as long as a history, as I mentioned, as the United States investigating this topic, dating back to really just after the Roswell days, the early 50s, all the way through to 1996, when they formally wiped their hand cleans of this topic and said, move along, folks, nothing more to see here. So let's move our way down. Key messages. Number one, Defence does not have a policy governing the reporting or recording of unidentified aerial phenomena by either members of the public or Defence members. So no sensible see-something reporting mechanisms in place whatsoever for members of the Australian Defence Force. That's number one. Number two, the Air Force ceased the handling of reports of unidentified aerial phenomena in 1996 after determining there was no scientific or other compelling reason to continue to divert resources to the recording and investigation of unidentified aerial phenomena. So how did we get to that point? How did the Royal Australian Air Force come to the determination that there was no scientific or other compelling reason to devote resources to the topic? There is a document that was released through the Freedom of Information Act a number of years ago, but this document that I'm going to show you on screen really hammered the nail on the coffin for an investigation of UAP in Australia. This document, Brief for CAS, That is an acronym for several decades ago, the Chief of Air Staff, the equivalent of the Chief of Air Force today. Unusual aerial sightings. If you're wondering what unusual aerial sightings are, that's what the Royal Australian Air Force referred to as UFOs or UAP. UAS, unusual aerial sightings. And so there was a formal policy in place from I believe it was the early 50s through to essentially the mid 90s when they stopped investigation of UAP altogether. And this document really, which is authored by Brett Biddington, who is an interesting individual who I've engaged with a number of times via email. I've corresponded, and this was the key one. So essentially, back in 1993, a policy recommendation was made by Brett Biddington that the Chief of Air Staff, the Chief of Air Force, consider this being the new policy for UAS going forward. For many years, the RAAF has been formally responsible for handling unusual aerial sightings, UAS, at the official level. Consideration of the scientific record suggests that this is the key bit, whilst not all UAS have a ready explanation, there is no compelling reason for the RAAF to continue to devote resources to recording, investigating, and attempting to explain UAS. Again, the recommended policy being the RAAF no longer accepts reports on UAS and no longer accepts attempts assignment of cause or allocation of reliability. Members of the community who seek to report a UAS to RAAF personnel will be referred to a civil UFO research organization like a MUFON in the first instance. And there you go. So the point of concern there is, well, if not all UAS have a ready explanation, isn't that in itself enough of a compelling reason to continue to devote resources to the investigation of UAS? Because Keith Basterfield, who is a veteran researcher on UAP in Australia, who I have the greatest of respect for, and I've had the opportunity to learn from him directly, he authored a very good document that essentially examines the Australian government's history with the UAP subject. And his determination was, in this document, was indicated that approximately 3% of the cases that the Royal Australian Air Force investigated throughout its lifetime investigating UAS or UAP could not be explained, did not have a ready explanation. So again, isn't that just like Project Blue Book? A small percentage of cases could not be explained. Again, the fact that there are, we don't know about the ones that are explained. We want to know what the ones are that aren't explained. So isn't that like RO is doing? That's RO's mandate, to get to the bottom of those that are the 2% that remain unexplained. So it's just kind of mind-boggling that the Royal Australian Air Force was quite happy to shut the door, even though it acknowledged that UAS, UAP don't always have a ready explanation. So let's come back to that document so we can continue on. The next point I wanted to raise was the third bullet point there. See if I don't think I can highlight it on screen, but the third bullet point: defense safety of flight incidents, including those potentially posed by unidentified aerial phenomena, are handled by the Defense Aviation Safety Authority, or for short, DASA, with civilian safety of flight incidents the purview of the Civil Aviation Safety Authority, or CASA. Now, why is that significant? Actually, you know what? I'll come back. Actually, I might as well cover off on now. So, in the previous videos that I've done on what is Australia doing about UAP, I wanted to get to the bottom of, well, what is the Defense Aviation Safety Authority's procedures or protocols that they've got in place if there are safety of flight issues, incidents, accidents, near misses, and those sorts of things. So I had a look at the DASA's website, where they have a lot of their policy documents, and there is a document called, this is DASR Form 44, called an occurrence report. And essentially, reportable occurrences, and I'm reading off a sheet so I don't get it wrong. reportable occurrences are defined as an accident, malfunction, defect, technical defect, or exceedance of limitations that endanger or could endanger the safe operation of aircraft and must be reported to the authority. The Defense Aviation Safety Regulation, DASR, basic regulation categorizes reportable occurrences in 4 buckets. 1, aircraft flight operations. 2, aircraft technical. 3, aircraft maintenance and repair. 4, air navigation services, aerodromes, facilities, and ground services. So the Defense Aviation Safety Regulation, and I'll just pull up another document. We'll come back to that one in just one moment. Here it is. So this is the Defense Aviation Safety Program Manual, which is all part of the Defense Safety Aviation Regulation. And this is a document that's been updated only recently, signed off on by the current Chief of Air Force, Air Marshal Rob Chipman. And if I just do a quick search on near misses, this is what is key. So safety reporting system. A safety reporting system is a major source for ongoing hazard identification, regularly raising potential safety issues such as those found in accidents, incidents, and near misses. Now, why is near misses important? Because the ODNI in its preliminary assessment indicated that there had been 11 near misses with UAP. That's now increased to, I believe, 14, which was disclosed at the recent UAP hearing in the US. Near misses or errors, it can provide valuable information to the authority and the organization on lower consequence events. It is important that organizations provide appropriate protections to encourage people to report what they see or experience. It should be clearly stated that reported information will be used primarily to support the enhancement of safety. The intent is to promote an effective reporting culture and proactive identification of potential safety. So, now, the thing that's unclear is it's unclear as to what classifies as an incident. But I know from having explored the Defense Aviation Safety Regulation, the basic regulation documents, that an incident, the regulation documents that a serious incident, such as a near collision or near miss, that requires an avoidance maneuver to avoid a collision or an unsafe situation, or when avoidance action would have been appropriate. So that's essentially what a serious incident is classified as. Now, that being said, okay, well, near misses are all good. If there is, clearly a hazard, you would expect that to be reported, no matter what it is that military aviators or pilots are encountering. But what about instances where the safety of aircraft flight operations were not endangered? So what if it wasn't a near miss or, a potential collision? Like, for example, what if a military aviator or pilot had simply observed a UAP from the cockpit in the, in the far distance, like the Tic Tac, like the gimbal, like the Go Fast? So a visual sighting of a UAP that's several miles away, it might be no immediate safety of flight risk, but according to the Defense Aviation Safety Regulation, if in the view of the reporter, being the one that's submitting the report, an occurrence did not hazard, so an occurrence being a sighting, if a sighting did not hazard the safety of the operation, but if repeated in different but likely circumstances would create a hazard, then a report should be made. So they're basically saying you only have to report, if you see a UAP, you don't have to report it only if there's a repeat occurrence of that UAP and it becomes a safety of flight risk. So there is no mechanism whatsoever to encourage the reporting of UAP observations. And why I say that is because one of the versions of this Chief of Air Force document, a previous version that I, again, secured through the release of the Freedom of Information Act, says, blanket, black and white, this is the same Chief of Air Force brief, but this is an earlier iteration. What does it say? There was no special encouragement given to pilots to report aircraft they cannot identify, rather to report unusual or unexpected events through RAAF aviation safety reporting procedures. So again, they're only having to report near misses, serious incidents, accidents. They don't report an observation of a UAP, which could become a potential hazard. But they're not required to report on it. And there are no reporting mechanisms currently in place whatsoever. So that is a problem, because if we look at, if we come down to the next point, go back to that document we were just looking at, the latest version of the Chief of Air Force brief. Let's have a look at some of the talking points. Again, talking points being, if you're asked a question about safety of flight, this is what the Chief of Air Force would be scripted with, some scripting to respond. Under Air Force aviation reporting protocols, there have been no records of observations or sightings of unidentified aircraft over the past 10 years. Well, the problem with that is you don't have any reporting mechanisms in place. How are you going to get reports if there's no sensible see-something reporting mechanisms available to military aviators, pilots, and defense personnel? And what did Ryan Graves say at the UAP hearing? His estimate, and it was just his personal estimate, was that 95% of UAP observations go unreported. Only 5% are reported by aviators and pilots and personnel of the defense. We're at zero. We don't even have any reporting mechanisms in place, because the first bullet point that you just saw, defense does not have a policy governing the reporting or recording of UAP. And what motivation or what incentive would a military pilot or aviator have to come forward and volunteer their report, which they could certainly do if they really felt like they wanted to volunteer that they had seen a UAP? Well, this occurrence report document actually has one of the options on the reporting form is, well, what was the occurrence? Was it an accident? Was it a serious incident? Was it voluntary reporting? But why on earth would a pilot in the Royal Australian Air Force want to report a sighting of a UAP when this is the ridicule and stigma that they and the topic are subject to? And this was this footage I'm about to show you is from the 9th of November of last year.
Incursions in defence training ranges by unidentified objects, intrusions by unknown aircraft or objects would represent serious hazards to the safety of flight and potential threats to security of our operations. You've obviously got strategies in place to do that here. Are you aware of reports? I did raise this with the previous Air Marshal as well, of US military exercises being cancelled because of concerns around air safety and observations of UAPs.
Is this a UFO question?
You could call them a UFO if you like, Senator Wong.
Really?
They're now technically
so just so I'm clear,
unidentified aerial phenomena. Or do you think it's funny?
So if that's the reaction that members of the Australian Defence Force are going to encounter when they report an observation of a UAP to their higher up, and that's the response they get, and their record is blemished or tarnished with a black dot saying that this individual is got the tinfoil hat on. Why on earth would a member of the Australian Defence Force want to report an observation of a UAP if that's clearly the level of stigma and ridicule that plagues this topic currently in Australian government and in the halls of the Australian Department of Defence? So if a military aviator observes a UAP from his or her cockpit, as an example, during a training exercise or in real-world operations, and it seems what they see, they can't identify, they can't reconcile it immediately, and it seems to exhibit unusual flight characteristics or appears to defy the known laws of physics, but it's not repeated, that is a one-time incident, and it doesn't create a potential hazard. Nah, don't worry about it, mate. You don't have to record it. You don't have to report it. So they're not required to report it. And why would they want to report it if that's the response that they're going to get from people within government as well as senior officials in the Department of Defense? That's what really pisses me off, is that this topic in Australia, unfortunately, is still plagued with ridicule and stigma, and we see it constantly in the media. Whenever the media covers this subject, they always play the bloody X-Files theme at the front end of it. So the media is not taking it seriously, the Australian government's not taking it seriously, and certainly the Department of Defence is not taking it seriously whatsoever, and you'll see that as we go through. So let's kind of speed through some of these other bullet points. Where did we get up to? In the last 10 years, well, I would say, okay, you don't have any reporting protocols in place. No reporting mechanisms equals no reports. Quite simple. Any unidentified aircraft identified by Air Force pilots or personnel entering military-controlled airspace or posing a safety risk to military aircraft are subject to Air Force aviation safety reporting protocols, which I've just touched on in summary. They don't have to report it if it doesn't repeat its behavior, if the observation is not repeated and doesn't present a hazard. Aircrew can report unidentified aircraft to airspace control agencies and report unusual or unexpected activity through aviation safety procedures. Well, of course they can report it. They can volunteer that information on their DASR Form 44 occurrence report. But again, why would they want to, when that's the level of stigma that's going to be attached to it? We are aware of the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, ARO, within the United States Department of Defense, and continue to monitor their reports. Well, good. I'm glad you're aware of ARO and what they're doing to try and get to the bottom of this issue. We're aware of the latest reporting on 19th of April 2023. That was around the time of the hearing that Senator Kirsten Gillibrand chaired and that Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick testified at. That they are examining a number of cases. However, they have not found any credible evidence of extraterrestrial activity, off-world technology, or objects that defy the known laws of physics. Well, one of the problems that we know on that front is that ARO, and this is according to Ross Coulthard's sources, that ARO does not have full Title 10 and Title 50 authority. So it's a very reactive investigatory body. It's not proactive whatsoever. So if it gets these reports of these, SAPs or waived unacknowledged SAP, they can't do anything about it because they don't have the full Title 10 and Title 50 authority. Again, that's according to Ross Coulthard's sources. That's not coming from me on that front. Air Force's position continues to be that there is no scientific or other compelling reason to divert resources to the recording and investigation of unidentified aerial phenomena. This aligns resources with the priorities, mission, and objectives of defense. Well, again, why are you not taking the stance that, okay, we're going to formally review our position on UAP? Because one, we haven't investigated the topic since 1996. Two, we've stated that we have no desire to collaborate with allies on the issue. Three, we haven't engaged the US or been engaged by the US. They have now because of the Five Eyes forum on UAP, which I cover in one of my earlier videos. And we know that the Royal Australian Air Force and Department of Defence has not been privy to any of the classified data that's housed within the classified reports that have been provided to Congress, because they've said they have had no engagement with the US to date. Background information. On the 19th, and I'm just going to leave, actually this is the one that is incredibly embarrassing. On the 19th of April, 2023, the United States Department of Defense released a news article on the testimony of Senator M. Kilpatrick. Who the flying fuck is Senator M. Kilpatrick? Now, talk about a clusterfuck. The only thing they got right there on Sean M. Kirkpatrick is his middle initial. So whoever's authored this document can't even get Dr. Kirkpatrick's name right. What an embarrassment. Where's the due diligence in this document? Senator M. Kilpatrick. Director, all they would have had to do is read jump on the Department of Defense's website in the United States, or jump onto, I'll make it even easier for you, jump onto Wikipedia and it's right there for you with a photograph of the dude. So how do you get that wrong? How do you stuff that up? You know, you had one job, whoever authored that document, and you can't even get the basics right on the guy that's leading the investigatory body in the United States. Oh, embarrassing. It goes on. The article summarizes the senator's testimony. Well, no, he's not the senator. He's the director of the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office. An unidentified aerial phenomena is anything in space, in the air, on land, in the sea, or under the sea that cannot be identified and might pose a threat to United States military installations or operations. The Department of Defense department is working to better understand. Doesn't make sense. The department is working to better understand, respond, or maybe respond to unidentified aerial phenomena. All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office scientists continue to improve their data collection and implementation of rigorous scientific and intelligence analysis to resolve cases in a systematic and prioritized manner. Only a very small percentage of unidentified aerial phenomena reports display signatures that could be reasonably, again, the grammatical errors in this is terrible. Signatures that could be reasonably be described as anomalous. The majority of reports demonstrate mundane characteristics of balloons, unmanned aerial systems, clutter, natural phenomena, or other readily explainable resources. Again, if you want a compelling reason as to why UAP should be investigated, there it is. Only a very small percentage can be described as anomalous. Well, they're the ones that we want to get to the bottom of. They're the whole ones that you want to identify. Like Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick said, what was his joke, his dad joke that he made? Was it SEP? It wants to be someone else's problem. He wants, identified issues to be handballed over to someone else's problem. The All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office have found no credible evidence thus far of extraterrestrial activity, off-world technology, or objects that defy the known laws of physics. To what degree Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick has had engagement with David Grush, that's a big question. We know that Senator Kirsten Gillibrand has requested that Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick meet with David Grush, and she has also requested to meet with David Grush. So be interesting to see what we hear about those developments down the road. Going back to some of the historical information that is background information on this report, on the 11th of January 2023, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence delivered the annual report. It was due in the end of 2022, but it was late, came 2023. Annual report on unidentified aerial phenomena, now unidentified anomalous phenomena, to Congress as required by the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2022. The report summarizes that unidentified aerial phenomena continue to represent a hazard to safety, to flight safety, and pose a possible adversary collection threat. You've just nailed it right there. You've just stated in black and white that their report indicates that there's a hazard to safety of flight and a possible adversary collection threat. National security threat, safety of flight threat. If you're recognizing that there are issues and that the US has faced a massive domain awareness gap because they haven't been, they haven't tweaked the sensitivity of their radars to pick these things up. If Australia's ignoring this, then that's a gaping wide domain awareness gap that Australia's going to face. And you only have to go back and look over some of my historical videos on this topic to see how the Australian Department of Defence and Royal Australian Air Force responded to the Chinese balloon and the 3 identified aerial objects that were shot down by the US. The Chief of Air Force will happily request information and briefings on those incidents, but not UAP. And the Royal Australian Air Force considers UAP to be human-made technologies or foreign adversarial systems. Chinese spy balloon, unidentified aerial objects. You're requesting information on those, but you're completely ignoring the broader UAP topic, which you believe, Royal Australian Air Force, that is just human-made technologies or foreign adversarial systems. So the hypocrisy on that front is massive. Since their publication of their preliminary assessment in June 2021, unidentified aerial phenomena reporting has increased. However, could be attributed to a concentrated effort to destigmatize the topic. Another check. Increased reporting, sensible say something reporting mechanisms afforded to members of the United States Defence Force. Increase in number of cases reported. In Australia, 0 reporting mechanisms, 0 cases. And again, why would anyone want to come forward if they're going to be faced with that ridicule that you saw from Senator Penny Wong, who's the Minister for Foreign Affairs? The All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office has been established as the United States Department of Defense focal point for unidentified aerial phenomena. Coordinated efforts between the United States Department of Defense and other government agencies to collect and report unidentified aerial phenomena events have resulted in increased data sets spanning multiple security domains. Again, that's important for the Australian Defence. Australian Department of Defence. Increased reporting has led to increased data sets, getting more clarity and more data on what's coming through with these reports. On the 25th of June, 2021, the United States Office of Director of National Intelligence released a preliminary assessment, unidentified aerial phenomena, the report, known as the report, to provide an intelligent assessment of the threat posed by unidentified aerial phenomena and the progress the United States Department of Defense Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force, the UAPTF then, has made in understanding this threat. The report does not draw any conclusions on what unidentified aerial phenomena are, and most remain unexplained, mainly due to lack of data. The report finds no evidence that unidentified aerial phenomena are extraterrestrial in origin. Why are you even bothering to volunteer that information in this Chief of Air Force brief? There is no reference at all to extraterrestrial in ODNI's preliminary assessment. So why, RAAF, do you feel the need to underline time and time again that the report finds no evidence that UAP are extraterrestrial? They didn't come to that conclusion. They didn't. There was no conclusion drawn whatsoever. They didn't even reference ET as a potential origin for UAP. They just had a catch-all other bin, which could be a smorgasbord of things, but they never alluded to ET whatsoever. So why are you choosing to do so? Why are you volunteering that in this particular report? Make sure I got my notes here, and then we move on again. The report did reach the following conclusions. In a limited number of incidents, unidentified aerial phenomena reportedly appeared to exhibit unusual flight characteristics. These observations could be the result of sensor errors spoofing, which is blue on blue. So, if there is a new aircraft that they want to test for capabilities and vulnerabilities, they might put it in a training range and do some exercises to see if they can, spoof, test the vulnerabilities of what would be a foreign adversary, blue on blue spoofing to again flag what improvements can be made to mitigate vulnerabilities and how they can exploit capabilities, those sorts of things, or observer misperception and require additional rigorous analysis. There are probably multiple types of unidentified aerial phenomena requiring different explanations based on the range of appearances and behaviors described in the available reporting. Unidentified aerial phenomena, this is the key one. And this is RAAF. This is RAAF's words. Unidentified aerial phenomena clearly, the word clearly, pose a safety of flight issue and may pose a challenge to United States national security. Unidentified aerial phenomena would also represent a national security challenge if they are a foreign adversary collection platform or provide evidence a potential adversary has developed either a breakthrough or disruptive technology. You said in the earlier iteration of this Chief of Air Force brief that UAP could be one of 3 things, and it could be a foreign adversarial system that falls within the remit of the intelligence community. Well, if it's only the intelligence services like ASIO or ASD, Australian Signals Directorate, or ACIS, or the National Geospatial Organization, Defense Intelligence Organization, if it's only the intelligence community that is focusing on UAP as a foreign adversarial threat, don't you think that members of the Royal Australian Air Force and Department of Defence that are at the front lines, military aviators and pilots, if they see an aircraft or an anomalous object that they cannot identify, that's a huge domain awareness gap. If it's a potential foreign adversary, they say, "Oh, don't worry about reporting it because it didn't repeat. The observation didn't repeat, and it didn't become a potential hazard or collision or near miss of safety of flight." I feel really bad for the brave men and women in the Royal Australian Air Force that are at the front lines that are given absolutely no sensible see something, say something reporting mechanisms if they cannot reconcile something that they see in the sky, whether it's an aircraft, which could be foreign adversarial, whether it's an anomalous object that displays unusual flight characteristics. It's clearly a safety of flight issue, a national security issue, but essentially you're just saying, "Oh, don't worry about it. It's all good. We've got the intelligence community on it. They'll suss it out for us." I believe the Royal Australian Air Force is breaching its duty of care by not affording its aviators, pilots, and general personnel in the Australian Defence Force. It's breaching their duty of care by not affording folks with sensible see something reporting mechanisms. And that is the frustration that Ross Coulthart is hearing time and time again from both current and former members of the Australian Defence Force. They're coming to him and saying, "Our guys, we're seeing these things in the sky, wherever they're in training ranges, in restricted airspace, but the whole topic's been laughed off. We're being ridiculed, and the stigma that's associated with reporting an observation of UAP, no one is taking it seriously. So there's no motivation for anyone that observes UAP to say anything because it's not going to be taken seriously. And if they do say something, they lodge a report. Well, what the hell happens to the report? Nothing. It just gets filed away somewhere in a drawer because there's no reporting and recording and reporting mechanisms currently in place. So I cannot get my head around the fact that Australia, the Department of Defence, is not taking the UAP topic seriously as a national security threat and a safety of flight risk. And all you need to do is listen to Ryan Graves and David Fravor at the recent UAP hearing. They hit it home 100%, time and time again. Safety of flight, national security. We wouldn't be able to defend ourselves if we were in a position where we had to engage that UAP, the tic-tac. There is nothing that they would have been able to do to defend themselves or their aircraft. Massive issue. And I wish that more members of elected representatives within government, members of parliament, as well as Australian senators, would get off their fat ass and take the topic seriously and follow Senator Whish-Wilson's lead and ask some serious questions of defence leadership, along with the Australian legacy news media. And that's another story altogether. On 23rd November 2021, the United States Director of National Intelligence directed the establishment of the Airborne Object Identification and Management Synchronization Group, AIMSOG, or AIMSOG, as I think they referred to it as the acronym, to coordinate reporting across the United States Department of Defense and other United States agencies with the goal to minimize flight safety and national security concerns. Kudos to the Pentagon, the Department of Defense, actively taking steps to try and mitigate, or I should say destigmatize the topic by affording personnel with sensible say something reporting mechanisms, kneeboard reporting tools in their was it a reporting thing on their kneeboard in their cockpit? So if they do see a UAP, they can make note of the observation. Then they've got a mechanism in place. Defence has no plans to replicate a similar mechanism. The Defence Aviation Safety Authority and Civil Aviation Safety Authority already serve this function across flight safety issues, and apparatus exists for concerns regarding national security, but not UAP. DASA, CASA, Australian Air Services Australia, who look after air traffic control. None of them have any reporting mechanisms in place to record and report on UAP. I know because I've submitted FOIA requests for all of them, requesting your reports, documentation. they've all come back and said that we don't have, in alignment with Department of Defense, we don't have any recording and reporting mechanisms. Historically, the Air Force was responsible for handling unidentified aerial phenomena reports. However, that ceased in 1996. This is a joke. If civilians wish to report unidentified aerial phenomena, they should contact their local police authorities or get in touch with the Civil Unidentified Flying Object Research Organization. And that's, I'm pleased that put that in there. MUFON, Enigma, other organizations you want to report to. But with the greatest of respect to the coppers, what are the cops going to do? Seriously, you see a UAP, you go to the coppers, you report it, they take your statement down. What are they going to do with it? They don't have any reporting protocols in place to investigate anomalous objects that are seen in the sky that could potentially, if they're encountered by defense personnel, be a safety of flight risk. What are the cops going to do? Seriously, they don't have any reporting mechanisms in place. It's an absolute joke. And an example of this is in Darwin. A couple of years ago, there was Darwin. There's a lot of industrial infrastructure, petroleum refineries and gas refineries and so on. And one of the refineries up there, there was what was described as a bonnet-size object. For all intents and purposes, a UAP. It was unidentified, and it was operating with impunity in the vicinity of one of these gas or oil pipeline refineries. And if that was to, come down and cause destruction to property, I mean, that's restricted airspace first and foremost. And what are they going to do? People that work there, they see this thing that's potentially a risk to property and lives if it was to be an aircraft or object that was in distress, or a drone that came down, or something that was maybe more anomalous. What are they going to do? They call the cops and report it? Because they can't call defense. Defense doesn't do anything about it. They don't have any recording or reporting protocols in place. So reporting to the cops, again, much respect to the great work that they do. Just a joke that it should be lumped on their shoulders to have to deal with reports of UAP. Unidentified aerial phenomena may also be referred to as unidentified flying objects or unusual aerial sightings. Unidentified aerial phenomena is the contemporary term for such phenomena. And then just basically it wraps up with some supporting information. Now, this just shows you questions on notice. These are all of the Senate estimates hearings that Senator Whish-Wilson has attended and pressed the then and current Chief of Air Force on UAP. 9th of November, 2022. 19th of April, 2022. And I won't read through these except this one. In 19 April 2022, question on notice. A question on notice is, so you know, senators only have a limited time to ask questions. They've got about between, really 5 to 10 minutes to ask questions of defense leadership, or whoever it is in this example for Senator Whish-Wilson. So if he doesn't get through all of his questions, he can submit them as questions on notice, meaning that the defense leadership will need to report back to him with a satisfactory or a response. Basically, they're obligated to respond to any questions that he submits that he doesn't have time to ask during his allotted timing, or if he thinks of some additional questions that he'd like to ask outside of the hearing. So the question on notice 38, unidentified aerial phenomena. Senator Whish-Wilson asked for advice regarding the Royal Australian Air Force aviation safety reporting and for reports of unusual, unexpected events in the past 20 years. Defence came back to that question and said there haven't been any unidentified aircraft in the last 20 years. Well, again, 1996 is more than 20 years ago. You don't have any reporting or processes or protocols in place. So how would you know that you've got any reports when you've got no mechanisms in place for people to submit a report? I just don't get how you can bury your head in the sand that much and say, oh, we haven't had any reports. It's like, you're not even, what does R.V. Loeb say with respect to the Fermi paradox? Well, we don't see any of our cosmic neighbors. We're not even bothering to look. You're not even popping your head outside the window to see if anyone's, driving past, so to speak. So I don't know how you can think that, oh, well, move along, nothing to see here. No incidents of unidentified aircraft last 20 years, despite the fact that we haven't even been looking. We haven't even got any measures in place that facilitate capture of those reports. And then there were obviously 27th of October of 2021, there were some questions on notice submitted as well. Freedom of Information FOI requests. Air Force continue to receive a number of FOIs on unidentified aerial phenomena from constituents. You bet your ass you do, because I keep submitting them. And many of my colleagues do as well. And we'll continue to submit them until we get some satisfactory answers as to why you're not taking this topic seriously. Relevant media reporting, disappointingly, a big fat 0, no cigar there, no media reporting on this topic. And that is a big problem as well. The only reporting that I've seen out of the news media on UAP in Australian context is some select articles coming out of the ABC, but nothing on your mainstream media channels, the Brecky Central channels. They don't ask defense leadership any questions on this topic. They'll happily report on what's happening in the US with the caveat that they'll play the X-Files at the front of every bloody segment. So they're just taking the piss. Prepared by, who this document's prepared by, who it was cleared by, consultation, so who was consulted to assist with the informing of this briefing paper, and it was then cleared by obviously the Air Marshal Robert Chipman. And then it just has some attachments as to the questions on notice that were submitted previously. So for those of you that are on Twitter, I'll stop the screen share there now. My apologies if you've read this document already, because I did share it on Twitter only a few days ago. I know that there's a few of you out there, turn that off. There's a few of you out there that don't follow me on Twitter. If you're on YouTube or Facebook or Instagram, I didn't post a link to that Chief of Air Force Brief document there. So I will be adding, it will be on the Freedom of Information disclosure log in the coming probably weeks. There's usually a bit of a lag in the FOI team getting those release documents up, but I'll add a link in the description below. So if you, for whatever reason, your own reference, you want to download this document, you absolutely can. So that's everything that I wanted to kind of cover off on with you. I know it's just been a pretty straightforward read through with some of my supporting comments along the way. A lot of comments have come through, so let me just go through them relatively quickly. Want to see if there are any questions as it pertains to Mel Hupfield. Bikes and masks says that smirk. Yes, that is absolutely true. Mark, you absolutely nail it home. Our guys are asleep at the wheel. Absolutely. Peter A. comments, we need to dig at our Australian intel community. I absolutely agree. And the problem with that is that a lot of the Australian intelligence organizations, those that I referenced before, they're all exempt from FOIA. So it means I can't chase any documents from those agencies. However, if I am a concerned citizen and I want some questions to be addressed to whether it be, this is the problem with Freedom of Information Act requests. You have to kind of know what you're looking for. You have to be not too specific, but you don't want it to be too general. And you have to kind of know what you're looking for, because the Freedom of Information Act team will not volunteer any information. They will just be very, cut and dry, whatever the expression is, that they'll only provide you with information that is within the scope of your request. They won't volunteer any information. And sometimes if the scope of the request is too broad, they'll knock you back, saying there's too much of an administrative burden on the FOI team, so we're not even going to consider your request. If you don't know the specific documents you're kind of after, they can come back with, well, we didn't find any documents and no documents response. There is quite a delay with a lot of, the statutory deadline for response is 30 days on FOIA requests. More often than not, those drag out to upwards of 90 days. Unlike, thankfully we're not as bad as my good friend John Greenwald in the US. His longest request was waiting 13 years for a response. Thankfully, we're not that bad, but there still is a long turnaround time to get a response. So to that end, that's where FOIA can kind of let you down. It can reveal a lot of great breadcrumbs, and it can help inform other requests that you want to submit. But this is why it's important that if you're a concerned citizen on this topic and you want to get you want answers to questions that are important to you, engage your elected representative, contact your member of parliament, contact your senator, because if folks like Senator Whish-Wilson are able to ask questions of defense leadership in, say, a Senate estimates, they're obligated to get a response to their question. And even if the question, they don't have time for it in the Senate estimates, it's beyond their allotted time, they can submit questions on notice. And I don't tell you this to impress you, but to impress upon you that all of the questions, every single question that Senator Whish-Wilson asked of the Chief of Air Force, Air Marshal Robert Chipman, on the 9th of November of 2022, I authored every one of those questions. I had, because Senator Whish-Wilson and his Chief of Staff, his office, they don't have time. They don't have the time to invest all the energy and effort like we do on researching this topic. If we're heavily entrenched in this topic, we typically know a lot more than those in positions of leadership, because they've got so many other issues that they're taking seriously that are important to their constituents, right? So I was in a position where I could assist Senator Whish-Wilson by putting together 30 or so questions, and I've done this for each Senate estimates from that date, 9th of November of 2022. And to my surprise, he asked every question that I had drafted and proposed. Now, again, I don't say that to impress you, but to let you know that if you do engage your elected representative, you can help inform their thinking on this topic. And if they know that it's an important issue to you, and that it is a serious national security threat and safety of flight issue, that's something that they should be taking seriously. And if they're not in a position to, ask questions of defense leadership, well, they can easily refer that issue or questions onto a fellow senator that might be a member of one of the Senate, the committees that is going to be in front of defense leadership and asking questions. So that's why I implore you that if you take this topic seriously, engage your elected representatives, write them a letter. I've attempted to write letters. I don't always get responses. I've had most of my success with email, but different strokes for different folks. I'd sent numerous letters to my local MP, Bill Shorten, crickets, didn't get anything back. But I've had success with other senators and MPs through email, tweet, give them a call. And it's almost consistent persistence. You have to be consistent in how you persist with your inquiries with those senators or MPs that represent you and your interests. Don't just leave it at one email or one phone call or one letter or tweet. Follow up on them. Don't annoy the living crap out of them by calling them every day, but just follow up. And that's how I managed to have successful engagement with Senator Whish-Wilson. I would just send reminders and follow-up emails every now and then. And I was in a position where I could then help inform his line of thinking and his lines of inquiry when he's asking questions at Senate estimates. So I know that's a long kind of winded answer, but I do want to encourage you that if you take this topic seriously, do engage your elected representatives and the media as well. If you want to, I can't count the number of emails that I've fired off to 7, 9, and 10, the projects, not so much 7 Spotlight because they already cover this to a degree, thanks to Ross Coulthard's, documentary specials, but ABC, SBS. And, they don't, sadly, they don't want to touch it. I don't think they are really taking this topic seriously. But the more of us that engage the media and send these repeated requests that you should really be covering this story because our US ally and Five Eyes partners taking it really seriously. Well, what the hell is Australia doing about this topic? They need to be able to they need to know that this is an issue that their viewers take seriously. And the more of us that can reach out to them and communicate the importance of this topic and demand that they start asking some serious questions of defence leadership and government, that may help move the needle a little bit. Just want to go through some of the other comments that have come through. It's unfortunately true, Michael, that Defence does not have a reporting policy. Very disappointing, I know. Let us come on down. Daryl, they act like a really old guy. You're seeing things, don't believe in it. Old school tactic. Yes, unfortunately, stigma is still alive and well in the Australian government. Mark, our guys would be under pressure to keep a tight lid on it from the US military. I tend to agree with you on that assessment, Mark. I think that, and this is Ross Coulthardt's assessment as well, that I think that Australia is, unfortunately, I don't mean this in a derogatory way, but the US says jump and Australia says, how high do you want me to jump? I think we're waiting for the US to give us the green light to enter the arena, enter the game on this topic. We're in lockstep with the US in so many other things that are defense related. But I think if the US is wanting to lead the charge on this issue, it could be that Australia is just waiting for the green light at the appropriate juncture to be pulled into this topic. But the problem with that, though, is that you've now got RO under its legislative mandate is going to be having these frequent Five Eyes forum on UAP. Now, the Royal Australian Air Force has historically been the lead body, the lead organization, has taken the lead on this topic. So if they haven't done any investigation since 1996, they haven't engaged the US, they have no desire to collaborate, they haven't seen any of the classified data that's housed within the classified reports that have been provided to Congress, what benefit is it for RAAF to attend those Five Eyes forums on UAP? They're not going to be able to contribute a single thing. And that's exactly what Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick is wanting. He said in that public meeting, NASA's independent study team meeting, that he wants to engage the Five Eyes partners to see what they're doing, what their reporting measures are, what we can help them with, what they can help us with. Australia's not going to be offered a damn thing because we're not even acknowledging that a conversation needs to be had on the topic. So I suspect that the Australian Signals Directorate was actually represented at the Five Eyes Forum on UAP. That's an intelligence, they're in the intelligence community. They're all focused around signals intelligence. Unfortunately, they're FOIA exempt, so we can't get any confirmation from them that I cannot definitively say that Australian Signals Directorate was represented at that Five Eyes Forum on UAP. I can only speculate because the nature of the Five Eyes Intelligence Alliance is very much built around signals intelligence. Let's have a look at some of the other comments that have come through. Mark Mahiggins again says, RO have stated metal orbs are seen flying all around the world and they don't know who or where they come from. So what are our guys doing about it? It's a good question. They're not doing anything, which is, I would be interested to learn how many sightings or reports there are that are out there that are going unreported because there are no reporting mechanisms in place, or how many folks are reporting to civilian UFO organizations like MUFON or Enigma Labs or some of the other civilian organizations. How many? I'd actually reached out to Roger Stankovic, who is the managing or the director of MUFON for Australia and New Zealand. This is going back well over a year now. I was doing some research on my first video on what is Australia doing about UAPs, and I wanted to look at how many reports MUFON Australia and New Zealand had received in a comparable time range that the UAP task force was looking at, from I think 2004, from around the Nimitz incident through to 2020, early 21. And there was, from memory, 1,158 reports that they'd received in that time frame. Now, a lot of those obviously be attributed to prosaic explanations and natural phenomena, but if that figure of 3%, the reason why the Royal Australian Air Force, again, they couldn't readily explain all of the reports of unusual aerial sightings, they couldn't explain about 3% of them. If you apply that 3% to that 1,158 reports that MUFON received during that 2004 to 2020 time range, that's about 35 true UAP, true unknowns that would warrant further investigation. Because it only takes one UAP to be a foreign adversary, to be extraterrestrial intelligence, non-human intelligence, something else, interdimensional, ultra-terrestrial, future human. All of these possible explanations have been thrown around, and everything should stay on the table until it's not. I don't know what UAP are. All I want, though, is all I want is for UAP to be acknowledged. I want UAP to be investigated, and I want a conclusion reached as to what they are, whether it's prosaic or exotic. We're not even at the acknowledged stage yet. The Australian government, Australian Department of Defence, is not even acknowledging that a conversation is worth having on the UAP topic, which is such a shame. Just want to run through a couple of other questions and comments if there are any that have come through. Jimmy, they don't want any reports. Simple. Yep. Administrative burden. They just don't want to touch it. And I agree. Penny Wong's response. I actually like a lot of the initiatives that Penny Wong is behind. I think she does good work, but it was very, very disappointing to see her take on this topic. Yep, you nailed it, Mark. Smirking and giggling from Miss Wong all the way. Daryl, Australian Air Force and Penny Wong are immature reactions, slows down disclosure. Yep, and it doesn't break down the walls of stigma on this topic, which have plagued this topic for so bloody long. Let's have a look what else we've got. Just have a look at some of the other comments that have come through. Yeah. Our guys are frightened of our big brother and keep mum about it. Who knows? Well, Australia is so reliant on US assets and defense infrastructure. I mean, we're spending what, $500 billion on these 3 Virginia-class nuclear attack subs. And what have we heard from out of this hearing? That there is a clear nuclear connection to UAP. The Maelstrom incident, the Nimitz carrier group was the USS Nimitz is a nuclear carrier, nuclear-powered carrier. So if we're going to purchase for about $500 billion these 3 nuclear subs, which don't have nuclear armament or weaponry, but they're nuclear powered, well, wouldn't you want to have the Royal Australian Navy and the Minister of Defence briefed on UAP because of the fact that UAP are not just limited to aerial, they're transmedium. There could be submersible objects as well. So if they're going to be acquiring technology that there is a known connection to UAP on, a nuclear element, you better get off your ass and get briefed about it, because that's another national security threat that's going to come and sneak up on you. Let's see if I just want to make sure if there's anyone else that's made any comments. If you do have any questions, folks, do feel free to throw them in the chat. I will be wrapping up this this session in just a moment, but I do want to give you an opportunity to throw any questions. Let me just have a quick look. Michael makes a good point. In US flight rules, if you actively jam the sensors of our planes, it's considered an act of war. Yeah. And I was always surprised that the active jamming that was reported by David Fravor in the Tic Tac incident, like Chad Underwood, who was the aviator that was responsible for capturing the FLIR footage on the Tic Tac, that he reported active jamming, and that is, that is considered a hostile act and an act of war. So I've thrown this question to a number of people that I respect, and I interviewed on my channel not a while back. I think it was November last year. Brad Voorhees of Sonic Gravity. Big shout out to him. He does some great work. his podcast, so do check it out if you're interested. It's called Sonic Gravity, and he's a vet. And I asked him the question: well, what are the rules of engagement as it pertains to UAP? If there is active jamming of sensors, what are the rules of engagement for folks that are in an F-22 Raptor or an F-35? And there are things that obviously take into account. Is it a theater environment, or is it obviously TEC-TAC was a training exercise? You have to establish intent and those sorts of things. But it's an interesting question nonetheless. Grant, what happened to our Partner Five Eyes agreement? If our guys are involved, then why are they acting like they know nothing? It's a good point, because we'll look at the Five Eyes Forum on UAP, for example, and I asked Susan Goff if for confirmation or verification as to who was represented at the Five Eyes. They won't reveal that information. Her response was basically, well, it's up to our allies, our partner nations, to reveal that information if they wish. So we won't get anything out of the US on that front. I do have some Freedom of Information Act requests that are pending with ARO that I'm hoping will reveal some light on what engagement there has been across not just the Five Eyes, but other countries that the US have engaged on this topic. Because we remember at the UAP hearing in May of last year, Scott Bray said that, and I quote, "We have brought many allies into discussions on UAP." Well, who are those many allies? Because the only ally that we know about that the United States has engaged on this topic prior to the Five Eyes Forum on UAP was Canada. That's the only one. We now know with the Five Eyes Forum that RO Director Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick led the charge on that first inaugural forum, and Dan Evans, NASA lead, was also present at that meeting, which I found was interesting. Canada was represented, as was New Zealand. But what about Australia and the UK? Now, they're not saying anything. The Royal Australian Air Force did, though, respond to an email inquiry that I submitted to the Minister for Defence, Deputy Prime Minister Richard Marles, asking specifically who was represented at the Five Eyes Forum on UAP. The Royal Australian Air Force responded to me, not Richard Marles, but the RAAF did, because they've historically taken lead. They've taken the lead on UAP. They responded saying the Royal Australian Air Force did not attend the Five Eyes Forum on UAP. Thank God they didn't attend, because what would they have been able to contribute? So, but we don't know who was represented, and that's why my suspicions around the intelligence community being maybe the Australian Signals Directorate. The Levac vault. I don't think I'll be creating a vault of any kind anytime soon. I have the greatest of appreciation for what John Greenwald does with Black Vault, and I've actually leveraged the Black Vault a number of times in just researching. I've done some research, obviously, on the Westall incident, the Phoenix Lights incident, and John had actually done some submitted some Freedom of Information requests back in '97 following the Phoenix Lights. So there are some really interesting, cool documents in the Black Vault that you can find if you're interested in a particular topic, and that's just one of the many topics that he submits for requests on. Harry Bridges, good to see you. Thanks for joining. So they admit there is a safety of flight issue, but there is no encouragement of reporting, and they can't even get Kirkpatrick's name right. Thank you for reporting on this, Grant. You're welcome. And yeah, you're 100% right. There's no encouragement, no special encouragement reporting, no reporting mechanisms whatsoever, and they can't even get the name of the lead on RO correct, which is embarrassing. Coming to the end of the comments, folks. Eddie Wong in Oz, they've scrubbed most UAP history, and FOIA is limited by currency of info that may benefit adversaries or upset the US. Well, I know that from some of the Freedom of Information Act requests that I've submitted, that some of the exemptions that they'll use to withhold information or redact information is, first and foremost, privacy information, and that's fair enough. they'll redact any personally identifiable information, anything that can identify a person, they'll redact, and that's fair enough. They will redact information that is obviously national security related. If revealing the information is potentially damaging to an ally, if there is some information that is embarrassing potentially that pertains to an alliance with a foreign country, they will withhold, and often deliberations, what collaboration discussions go in, inform a decision or policy recommendation, or inform whatever it might be, they can withhold that information as well. So that's why I say, there's some of the limitations with FOIA. You'll only be able to go so far with those requests. But if you're able to engage a senator and have them get interested to ask questions, well, they get pushed straight to the top of the list. Because FOIA, you've got a backlog. It can be hit or miss with FOIA. You've kind of got to know where you're throwing the dart. Whereas if a senator is going to ask questions, they have to get their questions answered. Now, the answer may not always be one that is very satisfactory, but at least they have to get an answer. They're obligated to get an answer, and there are nuggets that come out of those responses. If Senator Whish-Wilson asks defense leadership a question during a Senate estimates or submits a question on notice, whatever that response is that comes back from defense leadership, that's their breadcrumbs for FOIA. I can then go after email correspondence, briefing papers, whatever it is that I want to track down that supports that particular topic. So Bikes and Masks, that's great work drafting those Senate estimates, mate. Thank you. Appreciate that. I did put a lot of energy and effort into it, but I wanted to try and help the Senate out as best I possibly could. Daryl, there should be a group meeting and invite them to have a discussion and push it forward. I may have missed an earlier comment there, Daryl, so I'm not sure what the context is pertaining to that one, but feel free to drop it in the chat if you wish. Eddie, appreciate your support and your kind words there, my friend. 12CM32, follow the money. That's where the truth is. Good point. And I think that's where there's a lot of value in what AOC was asking questions about with the recent UAP hearing in Washington, D.C. If there's been this gross misappropriation of funds, of taxpayer money, that defense contractors have been price gouging the Department of Defense and ripping them off, and there is money that's dedicated for one project, but it actually gets allocated to something else. Follow the money, absolutely, and I think that's a big part of what Congress is wanting to get the bottom of. Particularly, that's I think AOC's certain specialty and interest, cover-ups and corruption. That's what she wants to attack. Thank you, Jimmy. Appreciate the kind words, my friend. Great work, mate. Doing us Aussies proud. I'm only one Aussie of many that take this topic seriously, so there are many, many things that you can do as well to help elevate the conversation, whether it's be having a conversation with a family member, a friend, or someone that you've just met on this topic. You'd be surprised how many people are actually willing to have a conversation with you on this topic. I've used the example before that I'm originally from Sydney. I live in Melbourne now with my family, travel to Sydney a fair bit to visit my mum and that side of family. I was doing some research for Kurt Russell and the Phoenix Lights, one of my first deep dive videos, which is on my channel. You can watch it if that's of interest. The guy at the security checkpoint was going through my carry-on luggage, and I had Lynn Kitai's book on the Phoenix Lights. And he saw it, he saw the cover, and before you knew it, we were getting into a 10-minute conversation, in between the people that he was searching on UAP and what's happening in the US and the Phoenix Lights incident. And I was really quite surprised as to how receptive he was to just having a conversation with me, being a complete stranger, on the topic. And there's no, woo or tinfoil hat there stuff. It was all just a really pleasant conversation. So yeah, have a chat with people that you think might be interested to learn more about the topic, because we're all privileged in a sense in this community that we're passionate for it. We take it seriously. We probably are much more engaged within your just general average Joe on the street that doesn't take the time, energy, and effort to listen to the podcast that we do. Looking at you, Jimmy. Research the content that we do, read about it, engage those that, for example, like the number of people that I met at over the weekend. Ross Coulthard put on a really great Q&A event in Melbourne, talking about his book, obviously, In Plain Sight, everything that's a part of that, how he got to the stage he did with interviewing David Grush on News Nation, introducing the alleged Area 51 EGNG crash retrieval reverse engineering patch that has gone nuts on Twitter. And I had an opportunity to meet so many really great people at that event that I had engaged with on Twitter. I only knew them by a Twitter handle or by their name. Jimmy's a classic example. It was great to meet Jimmy and have a chat and a laugh, and so many other folks as well. So it would be really nice if there were more and more events that we could attend in smaller groups around this country. I know that there's quite a few folks in Melbourne that are keen to catch up. And now that I've caught up with and met a few, it'd be nice to have catch ups on a regular basis going forward. And I think there's a unique opportunity for each of us in our respective geographies around the country to maybe get together every now and then and have some chats on, well, what can we do to elevate the conversation with our communities, or maybe engage our elected representatives or the media. And I know there's an effort underway already following some of the folks that I met at that Q&A event in Melbourne, that there is a concerted effort now being undertaken on, well, let's proactively and attack and strategize how we want to engage news media. Let's bombard them with these requests that they take this topic seriously. So I think you don't have to just limit yourself to engaging your elected representatives or the media. You can engage your friends, family, colleagues. You can get together as groups and just have a laugh on this topic, because it's important that we take the topic seriously, but not ourselves. That's something I believe in quite strongly. So Rebecca asked a question: what about Jackie Lambie? She all about military veterans, right? Should she be taking this subject seriously? I'll find out if you don't know, Grant. Good question, and I don't know the answer to that one. So it would be very interesting to learn what Jackie Lambie's position is on UAP, because she is very, very, she's a staunch protector of veterans. She cares about military veterans. And I think she is known to put defense leadership in the hot seat and give them a good grilling. I've seen that in the Senate estimates. But yeah, I'd be interested to hear back from you, Rebecca, on that front. If you're able to find that out, it would be interesting to see what her position is on UAP, if she has an interest in it or appetite to take it seriously. Michael, watch the Senate. See if I show that one. Is it letting me show it? There we go. Michael says, watch the Senate Armed Services Committee. If that's the US that you're referring to, certainly yes. And if they're applicable in Australia as well, absolutely. It's going to be interesting to see what happens actually with future hearings in the United States. Hopefully we're going to see some more hearings down the road. Let's see what else we have. We are all vultures comments. I grew up with my grandfather telling me about the Gosford incident. It was sucking up water from Brisbane water. A ton of people saw it. Interesting. I don't know about the Gosford incident. It'd be keen to learn more. So feel free to, if you wish, We Are All Vultures, maybe add some information if there are some links regarding that incident. Feel free to add them in the actual comment section of this video, not in the chat, but in the comment section once this broadcast ends, and then those I can pin those links to the top of the comment section. Daryl says yes, Gosford incident is on YouTube. So yeah, there are a lot of historical incidents that I'm not aware of. I just haven't had the time. Being a full-time worker and having a 3.5-year-old, I don't have the luxury of doing as much research as I do on some of these really intriguing cases, and I rely on folks like Jimmy to provide me with an abundant number of links in my Twitter DM daily, which are great because these are things that I wouldn't find otherwise on my own. So see, 12 centimeter 32. If anything happened in Parliament to help Australians, that would be extraordinary or corrupt. Quite a fair point there. Steam Train Mark, we seem to have same approach as UK government, say nothing. Yeah, unfortunately, I agree with you there. Both the UK and Australia are pretty much on par with their complete lack of disinterest in this topic. I mean, UK has had an extensive history investigating this topic as well, and they had the the Condign report that came out some decades back. It's just such a shame that both the UK and Australia are so mum on this topic and have absolutely no appetite for any engagement whatsoever. They just want to flick it off, move along, folks. Nothing to see here. It's so sad that that's the approach that they take. Hell hath no 42. Question on notice, Grant, and sorry if I missed any update, but was there any outcome on the recent petition we signed that was sent to Parliament? Good question, really good question. And you'll be pleased to learn that, let me just pull up the House of Representatives, their e-petition site. Thank you for raising that, because I wanted to give you a quick update. So there we go. I'll just show my screen. So you can just see this here. So for those of you that aren't aware, I actually saw, this is going back now, oh geez, when was it? Maybe May, June, I believe. I saw a post on Twitter that someone I follow on Twitter had quote tweeted or shared a post that someone in the UK had started a petition in the UK for the UK government or the House of Lords or whoever is the they call it over there, to establish an investigatory body on UAP in the UK. And I thought, that's great. I mean, I've seen change.org petitions in the past, but they usually typically apply to the United States. So I saw this and I thought, geez, why didn't I think of this earlier? Let me jump online and see what I can find out about petitions that are applicable to the Parliament of Australia. And lo and behold, I found that on the Parliament of Australia website under parliamentary business, under the House of Representatives, you can actually create, you can request a new petition. It could be on any topic. And so I created a petition requesting a formal, this was back in, when did I request it? The closing date was the 21st of June, so it's closed now. And I was absolutely gobsmacked by the response that this received. 759 signatures. So 758 of my brothers and sisters in Australia signed this petition, including myself, bringing plus myself, including bringing it to 759. And the petition request, obviously just some background information for the House of Representatives to consider. And they take this petition, they present it to the House of Representatives. They have a regular cadence at which they present submitted petitions to the House of Representatives. And so just some background information on, obviously, the fact that Australia and the US are the closest of allies, but they could not be further apart on the topic of UAP. And so the petition was, what I had asked for was, we therefore asked the House to conduct a formal review of unidentified anomalous phenomena and consider the establishment of an investigatory body to assess the potential national security threats and safety of flight risks that UAP pose. So that petition closed on the 21st of June. Those 759 signatures were presented to the House of Representatives. That petition was, it conformed to all of the requirements that the petition has to adhere to certain requirements. It satisfied the petition requirements. So that petition has now been forwarded from the House of Representatives to the appropriate minister for a ministerial response. And so we'll get an update on what that debate was around that petition that was submitted and those 759 signatures, warranting a formal ministerial response. Who are we waiting for that response from? The Minister for Defence, Richard Marles, Deputy Prime Minister. So I am not feeling too optimistic that we, based on the current position of the Australian Department of Defence, that we are going to get a favourable response. But nonetheless, this is the sort of pressure that we need to apply, not just engaging our representatives, obviously, but also, there's nothing stopping, I'll bring my mouse back here, there's nothing stopping you from creating your own petition. And if you wanted to create something that's similar, you can. I'll put the link in the description below. So if you want to explore creating your own petition, the more voices that can scream from the rooftops on this topic, the more voices that get heard. So 759 was a great start, but obviously we need a hell of a lot more to really let the Australian government know that we take this topic really seriously. I'm cognizant of everyone's time because we've actually been going for a hell of a lot longer than an hour. We're shy of the 2-hour mark, but I do want to look at any other questions that came through. Question asked by, again, Steam Train Mark: has Australian Defence personnel had discussions with US military or intel personnel? I'm not aware of, through Ross Coulthardt's reporting, I'm aware from him through his sources that there was engagement by and between the UAP task force, which is now defunct, it's now RO, but a couple of years ago potentially, there was engagement by and between the UAP task force and Australian Defence personnel. Now, I've been trying to get to the bottom of who was that engagement with. There was Ross's sources had told him that it was the air attaché in Washington, D.C. I'd submitted a FOIA request requesting for correspondence, emails by and between the UAP task force and the air attaché in Washington, D.C. And key individuals in the air attaché, and that turned up no results. So whether or not my FOIA request was too specific or too general, I'm not sure. I'm still trying to work on other requests to try and get to the bottom of that. So Ross has been told that there's been engagement. I haven't yet seen any. I don't have any verifiable evidence to support that. It could well be true. I'm still trying to dig and get to the bottom of it. We know that the Chief of Air Force, Air Marshal Robert Chipman, has said publicly at the Senate estimates where he's testified that he has not personally been engaged by the United States, nor has he sought a briefing by his counterparts in the United States. The Royal Australian Air Force has not briefed the Minister for Defence, Richard Marles. nor has Richard Marles had any briefings with his counterpart, the US Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin. Richard Marles met with US Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin 5 times in the last 12 months. I've submitted FOIA requests for each of those engagements, and I can tell you that 4 out of those 5 engagements, there was no discussion tabled. There was nothing tabled for discussion on UAP. So if he has discussed it, it was probably off the books. But again, that's just me speculating. That most recent engagement was where Lloyd Austin, Secretary of Defense, came to Australia. This was only recently for OSMIN talks, and I'm waiting on the response of that FOIA request. But I'm doubtful that there has been anything tabled for discussion on UAP at the Minister for Defence Deputy PM level, which is again a shame. You know, Lloyd Austin knows about this topic because RO is within his remit, so he has to know about what programs are operating under his leadership. But Richard Marles has, I suspect, no idea when it comes to the UAP topic, which is a real shame. I just want to make sure if there's any. Ask if ASIO attended Grant, not the Air Force. I would love to, but unfortunately I can't because ASIO is FOIA exempt. So there's no way that I, as a private citizen, am able to get anything out of ASIO, nor will I get anything out of the Australian Signals Directorate, the Defence Intelligence Organisation, National Geospatial Organisation, or the NGAO, I think the equivalent of the National Geospatial Organisation in the US, ASIS, Intelligence Services Inspector General, they're all FOIA exempt. So I can't get anything out of them as a private citizen. But potentially if a senator asks them a question, the response might be classified. So we, the general public, sadly, won't know what the answer is. But if senators know what the answer is, and it then piques their interest to dig further, then there is value in that endeavor at least. Daryl, type UFO in Australia into Google and open up Google Maps location with question marks on UFO for encounter reports. I've actually seen, thank you. You shared that with me, Daryl, I believe, on Twitter. So you can actually get a sense as to what the heat map looks like for reports and UAP reports and sightings in Australia. I'm not going to even try and pronounce Curiouser Trooper Leclerc. Do you think a MUFON chapter in Australia would help? There's already one. So Roger Stankovic is the director of MUFON Australia and New Zealand. If you just go to MUFON's website, and I believe you click on the find a chapter or contact. Actually, you know what? Let's find it real quick. If you just go to MUFON's website. I'll just pull this up on screen so you can see it. I think it is, where is it? Maybe contact. There was a about. I'll put the link in the description below, but there is an international representation. It's just not on screen. Let's see if I can move on. ANZ. I won't waste your time now, but there is a MUFON ANZ chapter, and that's under Roger Stankovic, his leadership. So I don't know much about the ANZ chapter, how large it is. So, but Roger is on Twitter. For those of you that are on Twitter, he's really personable and engaging. He's typically happy to answer to any questions that pertain to MUFON. Well, look, folks, we might leave it on there because I think we've come through. My apologies if there were some comments and questions that you had asked that I haven't answered. Michael, really appreciate you taking some time out of your evening. Thank you for joining. Much appreciated. Again, I will put some supporting links in the description. Alexander Ben Cannon, thank you for joining, my friend. Great show. I really appreciate your kind words there. Let's see if there's, just want to make sure there is anything else. Oh, that's very cool, Alexander. You met Bryce Abel at the Roswell Fest back in July. I know there's a couple of live streamers that had an opportunity to meet him, and you met and Ross Coulter doing great work, and I really enjoy their Need to Know podcast. Need to Know is actually one of the podcasts that I rely on to keep me up to date with what's going on, because it's almost, I don't know about you, but it feels like it's almost a full-time job to stay up to date with what's going on with this topic. There's just something new every day, and having a full-time job and family life and marriage and the UAP topic don't really go well together, as my wife will tell you, and I'm sure there's a few others here that will agree with my sentiments there. Yeah, Need to Know, I rely on that podcast to inform me of what's going on, and also Ryan Sprague does a great weekly show somewhere in the live stream where he kind of recaps some of the key podcasts and live streams over the course of that week. So if you don't have a chance to watch all the live streams that you're interested in, my watch list in my YouTube account is just massive. I don't get a chance to watch all of them, sadly. So yeah, I would, if you're not familiar with some of the great work that Ryan Sprague does over at Somewhere in the Skies and his weekly Somewhere in the live stream podcast, do check it out, because it is a really good, informative and fun show. And just folks that I've engaged on Twitter, I know, like I've said before, Jimmy is constantly researching and exploring topics that are interesting to him. So he usually pops me a couple of links here and there. So thank you, Harry, for your kind words. 2 hours, I know. So on that note, I'm going to have some dinner. I'm going to let you all go. Ross, thank you for your comments. Thank you, Grant. Appreciate your work. New to this all and still a bit wobbly by it. It is. It's a topic that you can drown in very quickly with just the sheer abundance of information. So that's why I find it was helpful for me to find a few podcasts and live streams that that spoke to me with what I was interested in. What really got me into this topic was listening to it's now no longer online, but the Unidentified Celebrity Review is something that got me really interested in this topic, and it enabled me to activate myself and become kind of an advocate for this topic. Again, Ryan Sprague, Need to Know. There are a lot of great podcasts out there that put out just great content week after week, time and time again. And having done a couple of these live streams and videos now, I know how much time, energy, and effort that goes into preparing these sorts of shows. So I have the greatest of respect for anyone that is a content creator on this topic, because it really does require a lot of time, energy, blood, sweat, and tears to put some content together that is interesting to me, but also what I think is interesting to folks that are interested in this channel. So thank you all for watching. I really appreciate you giving me some of your evening. What I will say in closing is, if you've enjoyed this live stream, feel free to tell your friends, your social network, your colleagues about it. Thank you, Daryl, for your kind words. And if you're interested in following my journey on the UAP topic, I will leave you, friends, with this. So I hope you have a pleasant rest of the week. Bye for now.
If you have enjoyed this episode of the Unexplained Rundown, please consider giving it a thumbs up, sharing with your friends, family, colleagues, and social network, as well as subscribing to the channel. And if you'd like to be notified whenever the Unexplained Rundown goes live, premieres, or posts a new video, be sure to ring that cowbell.